President Trump, Secretary of War Hegseth, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Dan Kane, Senator Lindsey Graham, and a whole host of other people are all going out to tell you how our blockade on Iran is working great, how this war is going in our favor, and everything is going to open up in the near term because of all of our power. I can't take credit for what I'm about to tell you here, but what you're going to discover is that this is a buffet of stupidity, as our guest today just alerted me to just before we went on the air here. And I couldn't think of a better way to put it than that. Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst, and Larry the Shirt Johnson, one of our favorite guests on this show, maybe the favorite. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, brother. You're my favorite Korean barbecue partner.
Appreciate that. Well, look, let's just get right into it. It's just a lot of insanity, nuttiness, and just disconnection from reality. But it's important for people to see where we are here. So this morning, in case anybody's missed it, there was another press conference with Secretary Hegseth and Chairman General Kane explaining to us all about this new what's it called? Operation Freedom or Project Freedom, about opening up the Strait of Hormuz. We'll more on that in a second. President Trump himself has also come and said, man, this thing is working great. In fact, about an hour or so ago from the Oval Office, he said this.
The blockade's been amazing. It's like a piece of steel. Nobody's going to challenge the blockade. And I think it's working out very well. We're going to see. I can say this. Iran wants to make a deal. What I don't like about Iran is they'll talk to me with such great respect, and then they'll go on television, they'll say, we did not speak to the president. We did not. I just spoke to, we did not speak to the president. So they play games, but let me just tell you, they want to make a deal. And who wouldn't? When your military is totally gone, we could do anything we want to them. Who wouldn't?
Can I just ask, Larry, if their military is completely gone, why are we blockading anything? Why are we even having this conversation? We should be able to just roll into Tehran and throw up an American flag. What's up with that?
Yeah, we should have had not only a buffet of stupidity, but a buffet of lies as well. Stupid lies. Look, the United States has a limited number of ships. We got 3 carrier strike groups. My understanding is each strike group carries with it a maximum of 4 to 5 destroyers / cruisers and intermediate. So let's just do the math. 3 cruisers, 4. Let's go 5. So you got 15 destroyers and cruisers. There may be a couple of other destroyers. Then each of the MEUs, they carry. They have what look like aircraft carriers as well. And then they've got 2 additional ships. So right there, we got a total of, if you take all of those ships that are there to provide defense for the carriers and the MEU's main ship, if you take them, peel them off, and you're going to do a blockade, that means you've got the potential to seize 17 Iranian ships, because one destroyer can't seize 2 tankers that are 20 miles apart at the same time. Ask the question, how many ships have come out of the Strait of Hormuz, Iranian ships, since April 15th, when this blockade was put in place? That number would be 150. Now, the VBSS, the vessel boarding seizure or search and seizure protocol, is that you put a prize crew on board the Iranian ship, and then the U.S. ship that intercepted it accompanies it to wherever the U.S. is going to take it. So I'm not great at math, but I can figure out if we got 17, they can do out of 150. That means 133 ships got through at least. But that means if we use all 17, we have completely stripped our carrier strike groups of their air defense. Now, someone explain this to me, how this is a wall of steel, because the U.S. ships are staying 200 miles offshore. They know that if they get inside that 200-mile limit, they're going to be attacked with drones, cruise missiles, and short-range ballistic missiles that Iran has in abundance. And so that's why the United States is not actually, quote, sailing in there to do this. And the Iranian ships, when they come out, they're not sailing out to the 200-mile limit. They're staying, within 20 miles of shore. The ocean's plenty deep. They can sail along there. So this blockade, it's a complete charade. It's a facade. And so here's Trump spinning out this lie after lie about it, as is Hegseth and Kane.
Now, as we'll speak of Cade, during this press conference this morning, I'm going to show you kind of a combo clip here of first General Kane and second Secretary Hegseth, where they're talking about, in fact, the claim is, and it's disputed, but the claim is that we sent 2 of our American warships through the strait onto the other side. But it's very unclear. No one has bothered to declare about what they allegedly did, because they claim they did not escort these 2 American flag ships that are reportedly came through yesterday. But listen to what Kane says here when he talks about how many American ships have at least been attacked.
They've attacked U.S. forces more than 10 times, all below the threshold of restarting major combat operations at this point.
What is that threshold?
The threshold of restarting is a political decision above my pay grade. What I'll say is it's low harassing fire right now. It feels like Iran is grasping at straws to try to do something across the southern flank.
But ultimately, with the ceasefire, the clock stops. If it were to restart, that would be the president's decision. That option is always there, and Iran knows that, and that's why their choices in Project Freedom are important. The president retains the opportunity and the capabilities, more capabilities than we had at the start of this, to restart major combat operations if necessary. If Iran is not willing to follow through on its side of the bargain or make a deal, then the War Department is postured, locked, loaded, and ready to go. We hope it doesn't happen.
Now, let's look at those things in sequence. First of all, my understanding has always been that if we actually sail ships into the strait, that they would be like going through a shooting gallery, that they would be able to take them down. But what's been reported, at least, and man, it's hard to believe anything that's been reported, but apparently there were, I think, 2 cruise missiles and maybe a drone that was fired at one of the ships, and it
turned around and reportedly, got out of the strait. But I can't rule out that the Iranians might have let 2 of them go through, because if they allow them to go through, they then got them trapped. I mean, where are they going to go? Now they're going to have to run a field of fire if they want to get out. You've bottled them up inside the Persian Gulf. There's not a lot they can do. So that's one way to take them off the playing field.
But what can you come, because they haven't answered this question, and unfortunately, because of the new media press corps that we have in the Pentagon, they only have these French people that don't ever ask hard questions. Or actually, one did today, but and he got shut down. It was kind of funny to watch and curious, but nobody else asked a hard question. Why would we send 2 ships by themselves through the Strait of Hormuz? What possible military advantage would that give us?
Yeah, none. But it's a way, where you're dealing with optics. It's your way to say, see, we could penetrate it. And again, I can see the Iranians say, let it get in there. That way we now know where it is. Much easier to locate. And they could attach a mini submarine or 2 to them. That at the appropriate time, blow them up. It's just, if the United States did that, it's tactically and strategically stupid. Like I said, buffet of stupidity and lies.
Well, it continues on, and let's look at the other half of that clip there with Secretary Hegseth, basically saying, "Hey, and we're locked and loaded and ready to go." And this does seem to match what we've seen from other anecdotal reporting and some folks that I've heard from some other sources downrange. That says we've been locked and loaded for a while. We don't know what we would do, but we're sitting there ready. What do you make of his claim that they're locked and loaded, and should Iran be afraid of that?
Well, Iran's not afraid. They're aware that the United States is going to attack again. I've got a friend who's well placed financially in Dubai. He is connected. He has contacts within the Emirati government on the military side. And he was told in no uncertain terms that the U.S. is going to launch its attack. It's a planned attack for the 7th of May. So now I had thought yesterday, based upon movements we saw of the KC-135s, refueling, the movement of F-35s, that there was going to be an imminent attack yesterday. So clearly I was wrong on that. But I'm not giving people financial advice here, but my friend seemed pretty confident that his sources weren't engaged with idle speculation. It was something that they were told. And you've seen over the last week a buildup in the UAE of they've come out strongly in support of Israel. Israel deployed an Iron Dome with operators, and supposedly that was in place, but it failed to intercept the missiles or drones that hit Fujairah oil port, which sits on the Gulf of Oman. So it's outside the Strait of Hormuz. But that was the last sort of outlet for the UAE to pump some oil, about 1.7 million barrels per day. So, it looks like that's shut down now. So this is the U.S. is locked and loaded, but for what purpose? We're going to attack more targets inside Iran. And if we go after infrastructure, if we go after oil, if we go after power centers, Iran has already made it clear they've got us in their crosshairs. They've already got the target coordinates set. They know what the targets are. They're going to hit what it remains of U.S. bases in the Gulf states, including in Saudi Arabia and the Al Dhafra base just south of Dubai or Abu Dhabi. That is going to, I think that'll get wiped out. And there are a number of U.S. air assets there as well. Israel is going to get hit big time. So this thing by this weekend, I think we could be back in a full-blown war that will be actually worse than what we were experiencing prior to the declaration of the ceasefire on April 15th.
Well, they did say during the press conference this morning that we have more combat power in the region than we did at the start of the war. So that would certainly seem to validate that is a potential anyway. But let's look at this Project Freedom thing, because one is now wondering, is this just a facade? Because here's the map that was placed. This in the green there in the zone. You can see that is the southern part where General Kane talked about. This is where we have authorized ships to go through. The red two red lines in the middle. That's what used to be the center for traffic, but those have been basically shut down because of alleged mines. And then the blue one in the north, that's what Iran has allowed ships to pass through when they have followed the rules that they have set,
right,
et cetera. But then you look at the New York Times this morning, and other than those two that allegedly went through yesterday, nothing has gone through today. Nothing has moved through anywhere. So what can we draw from this whole, this facade? Is it nothing but charade to wait until the 7th?
Yeah, no, if nothing else, it's trying to create a narrative that will justify the United States renewing the attack, but renew it in a way that it's under a new name so that they can avoid the War Powers Act requirement that they had to go back to Congress last Friday to say, hey, give us authorization to continue or we have to withdraw. So, I mean, this is just Trump and them playing games. What everyone needs to understand is the only way the Strait of Hormuz will be opened up for normal commercial traffic is through diplomatic negotiations, because there is no viable military option that can open it. And they'll say, oh, well, what do you know, Johnson? Why do you say that? Okay, let's start with, first of all, you got to clear the mines. The U.S. is on the record to saying it's going to take the U.S. Navy 6 months, and this is assuming there's a ceasefire, 6 months to clear the mines, okay? So right there is problem number one. Problem number two, or threat number two, Iran has a number of mini submarines that launch torpedoes. Those are underwater. Those are not easily detected. Number three, they have underwater drones that operate like torpedoes, but they can be steered and guided. Fourth, they have surface drones, boats that don't have a pilot, don't have personnel on board, but like a kamikaze plane can crash into a boat. Fifth, they have actually the bog hammers, these high-speed boats that equipped with missiles, usually a 2 to 3 man crew. Then on top of that, they've got the regular Iran drones, which I think they have a range of about 100 miles. Then on the coastline, they have coastal cruise missiles that are in caves. So they're very difficult to locate, much less destroy. And then they have the intermediate and short-range ballistic missiles. That whole package to open up the Strait of Hormuz means you've got to eliminate all of those threats. Otherwise, the insurance companies they're going to say, we could be hit with a short-range ballistic missile. Until you eliminate those threats, the Strait of Hormuz will not be open for normal traffic. That's just the reality. People need to grasp that. And to me, it's such a simple concept, but boy, people act like this is trying to learn calculus while speaking Arabic.
You are on a roll today.
Sorry.
Let's take a look at what. Okay, so that's your layout of the whole situation. That's what's going on with this Project Freedom. What it's going to take to get the strait open, and where this may be headed as soon as this weekend. Let's look at what some other analysts are saying on mainstream media and see if we can find out which one measures up closer to what we can actually foresee. First of all, let's start off with a former Navy SEAL who's pretty cocky about where we should go next.
I guarantee they are sending out their mosquito boats under, gun. They're probably forcing their people to hit the straits in those small boats.
They don't want to be on those boats.
No, and add that to what Scott Bessent's done with his economic strangulation. He just reported that their soldiers are no longer getting paid. I'll tell you, it's one thing to scream death to America when you're getting paid and you're feeding your family, but once that stops, the loyalty goes away. They're losing control over their regime, which we didn't even think was possible to the extent we've beaten them. But this is a beautiful thing. This is a foregone conclusion. The president just needs time, and the Democrats are on the wrong side of history right here.
Why are we bringing the Democrats into this? What do they have to do with what's happening in the Gulf? I don't know. Yeah, we'll talk about this separately, but I want to zero in. There's a number of things he said there. I want to zero in on what he's saying there first, though, because I think that's important. Is he's claiming that the Iranian military is motivated by cash, and if you can't pay them, they're hitting the exits. What do you say?
Look at the demonstrations that are still going on every night, not just in the streets of Tehran, but in the streets of the major cities of Iran. People coming out marching in support of the government. That's number one. The current leadership that sits atop the Iranian government and IRGC, and military intelligence, all of them are veterans of the 1980-88 war with Iraq, in which Iran suffered 200,000 killed in action, at least 200,000 dead soldiers, and about 60 to 70,000 dead civilians. Compare that with what we suffered in Vietnam. In other words, that war went on half the time that the war in Vietnam did for us, and they suffered roughly 4 times the casualties that we did. And so that left a lasting impression on these people. They're not motivated by cash. They're motivated by the belief in the righteousness of their cause. It's something that we fail to take into account. When I hear this former SEAL quote Bessent, it just reminds me that this gentleman probably doesn't know how to balance his own checkbook, because when you're citing Scott Bessent for quote choking off the Iranian economy, let's remind people that Iran still has an open border with Russia. It's called the Caspian Sea. It still has an open border with Turkmenistan. It has an open border with Pakistan. Pakistan just announced that they've opened 6 land transportation routes that are carrying supplies into Iran, and that Iran, by the same token, has been able to export its oil despite the sanctions, despite the threats. And Bessent tried to threaten China to say, oh, if you process and refine any of that oil, we're going to impose sanctions. And what did China say yesterday? The Chinese government basically came out and told the United States to go pound it up their ass. They said, no, We're not going to have, you guys are all of these refineries and such. Ignore the United States. Pay no attention to them. They're no longer relevant. In Russia, what's Russia doing? They're saying, hey, you want to buy our oil? Great. You're going to pay for it with Chinese yuan, not with dollars. So Besson's notion that he's choking off the Iranian economy is delusional. It's just the opposite. What it has done is solidified the ties with Russia and China, and the land routes to resupply Iran, as well as for Iran to export, are wide open. The United States can't block those at all. Hell, we can't even blockade the Strait of Hormuz.
Right. And moving on to that, to another well-known, deeply respected military analyst in the United States. First of all, just as a quick reminder, this is the relief map of Iran, and why there's no way that we would ever have a land army even attempt to an invasion into the country, because we couldn't get through those multiple mountain ranges on the western side. So that's obvious, and so there's been some acceptance of that. But this incredible military analyst, you may have heard of, it's a senator called Lindsey Graham, has another way. Let's use a different set of boots on the ground.
If I were President Trump and I were Israel, I would load the Iranian people up with weapons so they could go to the streets armed and turn the tide of battle inside Iran. We don't need American boots on the ground. We've got millions of boots on the ground in Iran. They just don't have any weapons. Give them the weapons so they can rise up like we did to destroy this regime. A Second Amendment solution, I think, would go a long way to ending this war.
That's it. Let's pull the Second Amendment out. We love that part of the Constitution. We ignore the part about the separation of powers, but that's for another day. But man, did we love Second Amendment, and let's give it to the Iranians. Is that going to turn the tide?
One of the best indicators we have, those Lego videos that have come out with the guys that are producing those Lego videos in Iran, they were actually in the opposition before this war started. They were making those videos about the Iranian government, okay? But the Iranian government didn't lock them up and kill them. But now these guys are saying, hey, even though we had our disagreements with the Islamic Republic as a government, by God, we're supporting our government now. And they become the most effective propaganda tool in the world. In fact, I would say hands down, throughout history, we have never seen an information operation that is this powerful and this effective. I mean, these kids are incredible. They're like 18 to 25. Just damn impressive what they've done. And it's a reminder that these are the guys that, Lindsey Graham thinks were ostensibly going to rise up with weapons in their hands and to go after the Ayatollah. They're right now, what Americans fail to understand is that for the first time in the history of Iran, you have a government leadership, both political and military and legislative. All of those leaders are contemporaries. They all fought in the war in 1980 to 88. They all were combat veterans. They weren't just desk jockeys. And as combat veterans, as you know, that leaves a mark that stays with you throughout your life. And those that fought alongside you in those situations become brothers for life. They're not just temporary friends that you happen to share a foxhole with. And so right now, Iran is in a position where it's got the most unified government it's ever had. And it's probably good because it's facing a threat like it's never faced before. The war in 80 through 88 was a U.S. proxy war where we funded it, but we didn't directly participate. Now we've jumped into it. We're trying to fight it, and we're finding that the United States, despite its so-called glorious naval and ground force capabilities, are completely inadequate. They can't do anything here. We're having to rely solely on air power, and even that has its limitations.
And what about the prospect that, but if we just give them some guns, then these guys, whoever's left, I mean, maybe some of them are making Lego movies now, but some of them are still, opposed and have been clapping and things. What about the possibility? Is there any chance at all that if we get in large numbers of weapons, and that's a big if, could that cause like a fifth column on the inside?
Yeah, if you got a kennel full of hungry dogs, the hot dog would have a better chance of surviving than that plan for Lindsey Graham. No, no chance whatsoever. And again,
and let me ask you a related question to that, because there's another concept that could be at play here. In the event that you were one of those people in Iran that was against the regime and is secretly glad to see all this stuff and hoping that maybe the regime will fall and you can have something new to come up on it, if you took any action on that, I don't think it's just the IRGC or the Basij you'd have to worry about, but millions of other Iranians who would consider you one of the biggest traitors that ever existed for literally taking up arms for Israel and the United States against the state of Iran. How do you see that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the point you're raising is that Iran's the support for the government is well over 80%. Now, compare that with when the American Revolution kicked off. The support for the American Revolution here in the colonies was about 40%. There's another 20% that didn't care one way or the other, and then the remainder, the other 40%, wanted to stick with England. So we had the American Revolution was anything but it was not a widely popular uprising. It was an uprising by a group of people with a particular view to kick the British out, and it succeeded. But that's not what we have here. What we have here in Iran is we have created unity in a country where there was some disunity. There were opposition groups that weren't happy, but when they've been attacked from the outside, it has created a unity that, again, Iran hasn't experienced in 46 years.
Yeah, not helpful for us. Let's move on to the one of the other experts that's got a great track record for being right, and that's Brother Jack Keane, who's going to be talking here that this whole Project Freedom stuff, whatever it's called, in the Strait of Hormuz, yeah, maybe that's fine, but I think that we're probably trending towards military action resuming.
There are two things that will likely force us to go back into combat operations in addition to this priority mission. Fire on U.S. warships, that has happened, and also fire on our allies and partners in the region or U.S. bases, and that has happened as well. So it's likely that we will go back into combat operations, but the priority will be opening up the Straits of Hormuz and getting the traffic to flow. Mm-hmm. And the amount of resources we have involved in this thing is really quite significant.
Okay, so the resources are quite significant. That's fine. The resources didn't get the Strait of Orphan. Well, I was going to say it didn't open it the first time. It was open the first time, and that caused it to close. Right. Even if we go back on it, and he's going to make another comment on that in a second. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that it does happen. Then Israel joins in, and we got that whole dual operation going back into Iran again. Is there any path that where this can force Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz against their wishes?
No, absolutely none whatsoever. Because I laid out earlier, as long as Iran retains short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missiles and drones they're buried underground. They're not above ground and easily attacked locations. They've been buried deeply underground. They're hidden, but they're capable of being launched from underground, and they've got the ability to target specific ships in the Persian Gulf. So this is, Jack Keane's, he's a ground pounder. He has no idea about aviation operations and coordinated fires. That's just, that doesn't come normally with, like my old Marine Corps boss. He showed his bias, but he always claimed, look, we're better than the Army because we know how to coordinate naval gunfire with aviation gunfire with artillery. And, that may be true. But the point is, Keane he fails to understand and appreciate the layered depth of Iran's ability to defend and prevent ships from moving through the Gulf. It's just, this shouldn't be this difficult of a concept, but my God, these people just ignore it. That's nothing. We'll get through it. Well, good luck with that. I don't want to be on that ship. And it is, this has completely changed what the U.S. used to be able to do. A good friend of mine, he was the commander of the Hercules barge, which was set up off the coast of Bahrain during the oil escort operations in 1987. At that time, Iran tried to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, tried to shut down the Persian Gulf, but they really only had mines. And so we went in with minesweepers and cleared them out. They had some oil tankers, which we seized. And we seized a couple of the ships that were laying mines. They didn't have short-range ballistic missiles. They didn't have underwater, surface, or aerial drones. They didn't have intermediate range and short-range ballistic missiles. They didn't have any of that. They do now. And it's a whole different ballgame.
And plus, they weren't at war with us, and they didn't want to get into a war either.
Correct.
Now, then, that's off the table as well. Listen, let me ask you a little bit more of a disconcerting question in terms of the answer that you may give. There is a thought out there that this whole thing about trying to get the strait open and this pause and everything else has just been to rearm and get ready for the next round, and that there's never been any intent or belief that we can diplomatically open the thing up without agreeing to all the terms of Iran, which we're not prepared to do. And that going back into conflict has been the plan all along. And, and whether that's coming up on 7 or some other day, who can say? But when you listen to Jack Keane talk here, he doesn't seem to be in that same interview elsewhere. It doesn't seem like he's saying, well, we may have to do this. It sounds more like he's eager to do it.
I think it's inevitable that we're going to return to combat operations here. With full throttle Israeli combat operations. They're not involved in the Straits of Hormuz. We are. The priority for us will continue to be opening up the Straits of Hormuz. We likely can do some selective targeting of some very critical targets as Iran continues to violate the ceasefire. We did not violate a ceasefire. All we did is move ships through the Straits of Hormuz, and we're in a completely defensive crouch.
Does anybody believe that? You know, it wasn't our fault. We were in a defensive crouch. They're all to blame for this, and so it's inevitable. We're going to have to go back to conflict. What do you say?
No, Alzheimer's is a terrible disease. And, it's so sad to see Jack Keane's memory go like that. You know, the short-term memory just gone. I mean, come on. It was only, 60, what are we at now? 66 days ago that this war started. And as a war of choice by the United States. And despite all the initial claims that it was going to be a quick sweeping victory, that Iran was going to collapse, here is Iran still standing. And, yesterday they started launching preemptive strikes on the United Arab Emirates for Raja, the oil port that's on the Gulf of Oman. So that's outside of it. That's not affected by the Strait of Hormuz. But what it is it has a limited ability. It can put out 1.7 million barrels of oil a day, which, that'll keep them in cigar money and caviar money. They'll be able to have a little income for the UAE, but not much. And Iran, by shutting that down essentially yesterday, is sending a message. It's going to shut down UAE's ability to survive based upon their new alliance with Israel and the United States. This goes back to the whole Jeffrey Epstein affair, because the leader of the UAE is directly implicated in the rape of underage girls and even torture. He was asking for torture videos. The guy is just a sick bastard, and yet he's now decided to align himself with Israel. I guarantee you, one of the Epstein material is helping make that happen.
Well, that's not very good for peace and stability in the region and for everybody else in the globe that depends on the free flow of energy coming out of there. But Keane isn't the only one that feels like war is inevitable. This is an account that claims to have conveyed what Galibaf has had to say, the chief negotiator and also the Speaker of their parliament. He said that is a necessity of keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed and preventing U.S. destroyers from passing through it has made conflict between Iran and the United States inevitable. That same word. The main confrontation will be carried out with the Israeli regime. So whether it's Jack Keane, whether it's the observation of the ground, whether it's something you heard from somebody in the Emirates, or hear from Ghalibaf. It just seems like everybody is just saying there's no other way out of this. We're going to get back into a hot war.
Yeah. It should. Again, this is another war of choice by the United States. There is a path. There's a negotiated path open. Iran's been very clear about that. But Iran in that negotiation is not going to sell its soul. They're not going to surrender their sovereignty. This is Iran for the last 46 years has been in a battle actually to preserve and express its sovereignty. And the combined efforts of the West have tried to do everything they could to undermine that. But now Iran, in blockading the Strait of Hormuz, has all of a sudden discovered we've got some power we never knew that we had. And they're not afraid to use it. And in the process, they are being backed up by Russia and by China. As we with the Chinese announcement 2 days ago that going forward, none of their companies that are facing threats of sanctions by the United States, ignore the sanctions, ignore the United States, pay no attention to them. This is uncharacteristic. This was, if you will, undiplomatic language by the Chinese. It's the essence of them extending the middle finger to Donald Trump and saying, "Hey, eat this, orange man." So both Russia and China, I think, recognize that this is in a way sort of an existential threat for them as well. That this is the efforts of a dying empire on the part of the United States trying to hang on to the dominance that it's enjoyed. But the world has moved on. I came across an interesting statistic earlier today, just blew me away. Compare the top 10 banks in the world in 2000 with the top 10 banks today. In 2000, the number one bank was the German bank, Deutsche Bank. Number two was Paris Bank in France. Then you had 5 Japanese banks, so they controlled 50% of the top 10 banks in terms of assets in the world in 2000. Now, jump ahead to 2025. The top 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, are Chinese. There's only one Japanese bank left on that list. The German bank is no longer on that list. So what this means is, in the last 25 years, the financial center of the world has shifted from Europe and Japan to China. China is now sitting atop the world. You've got 2 U.S. banks in that top 10. Then you have 1 British, 1 French, 1 Japanese. So again, that's just in 25 years we've seen this dramatic shift. And the Chinese, they're not backing away from this at all. They're recognizing they've got the economic muscle. And now that Russia is telling to the world, hey, if you're going to buy oil, we're not accepting dollars anymore. We're taking yuan, Chinese yuan. All of a sudden, the role of the primacy of the dollar, that's gone. So that is one of these other consequences that's flowing out of here. And the other major factor that's at play is the economic effects of depriving the world of 20% of its supply of oil, depriving it of 25% of its supply of liquid natural gas, depriving it of 35% of its fertilizer, depriving it as well of helium and sulfuric acid, things that are important in producing other items like computer chips.
Yeah.
That we have yet to feel the full impact of those shortages. The shortages are there. And the markets have largely pretended that these aren't real. This will fix itself. No, it's not going to fix itself overnight. Even if, let's assume that today, tomorrow, they come to agreement, say, hey, the war's over, straits wide open, everything back to normal. It'll take a year for things to get back to normal, at least. But
and here's what the Trump's comment this morning and the press conference has dropped oil back. I think it was 107, 108. I think at yesterday's close.
Yeah.
see if it was 112. Sorry, got up to 112 yesterday. Closed at 109. Yeah, closed at 109. And now then it dropped down to 101. And so the market seems to be going, oh, great. Everything's going cool now. We must be heading in a good direction. But as you pointed out, number one, nothing has changed. There's no ships have gone through. So it's all been words. That's it. No fundamentals on the ground. And one wonders how much longer it can go on with this kind of fiction. And that's fed. Let me show you something that President Trump also said yesterday, which I guess people are still listening to, because this isn't really a war. It's more like a mini war.
We have a war right now, and we're into like, 6 weeks? They said, what's taking so long? We were in Vietnam 19 years. We're in Iraq for many years, 10 years, 12 years. Our country's booming now, despite the fact that we're in I call it a mini war, because that's all they are. They don't have a Navy anymore. Think of it. They had 159 ships. How many do they have left, Kelly? Out of 159, take a guess. She's very smart. 0.
The country is booming now. And then the market says, oh, okay, cool. As long as it's booming, that's awesome. Let's go ahead and just keep living like everything's fine. But it's not. I mean, what is your understanding as a former CIA analyst before these things are going to start biting and then you can't paper over them anymore?
Let me give you a data point that just came out this week. U.S. foreclosures filings surged to a 6-year high in the first quarter of 2026. So what that means is you've now in 6 years since 2020, you've got the highest since the COVID. You've got the highest number of foreclosures on property. That means people and businesses are not paying their mortgages; they're forfeiting properties that were supposedly owned or being they're having to give up because they can't make the payments. That's just one aspect. The number of layoffs, that's increasing. So the U.S. economy is anything but solid and healthy. It's just the opposite.
And let me just show here. This is gasoline stocks here, and it's already even right now at nearly the lowest point it's been in a decade. And the trend line, as you see there, is going to continue to go down. As we're supposed to get into the driving season here in the United States, it's going to keep going through the floor, and you can't paper that over, man.
Well, yeah. So everybody that's watching that's in the United States knows that during the first 3 weeks of this war, the price of gasoline was creeping up, and then it stalled and the price actually started coming down. Why did it come down? Because the strategic oil reserve, they were raiding that, pulling out. They were trying to do everything they could to try to stabilize the price, which is one other reason why Scott Bessent was insisting, oh, remember those sanctions that we have on Iran and Russia? No, we'll let them sell their oil because they need the oil in the world supply. Well, now that strategic oil reserve is basically depleted. We don't have enough to affect the price of oil, and that's why I don't know in Virginia, but here down in Florida, in the last week, the price of oil, the price of gasoline's gone up 43 cents. It went from $3.57 to $4 yesterday, and I imagine it's gone up another 2 or 3 cents today.
Yeah, and so I mean, even when the market, the price of a barrel of oil can drop down, somehow the gasoline prices don't follow suit, because I think they're more on the physical amount, and they're seeing a lot of these things. Listen, in the amount of time we got left, I want to shift gears here a little bit, because there's something else that could be coming down the pike here in that other war that we used to talk about all the time, the Russia-Ukraine war, and could be around the same time as what you're talking about. This one could kick back off. Let me first of all show you. This is what Volodymyr Zelensky said, that the Ukrainian drones may target Moscow's May 9th parade. Putin called Trump last week and saying, hey, let's have a ceasefire during the period of the May 9th parade. I think it was from the 7th to the 9th, if I'm not mistaken. And Zelensky says, yeah, how about this? How about we rain on your parade with some drones? That didn't go over very well on the Russian side. because let's see if I got the right one up here. Yeah, they're saying, hey, how's about this? How about we have taken note of the settlement statement made by the head of the Kiev regime in Yerevan at the summit of the European political community, which contained threats to strike at Moscow on May 9th. The armed forces of the Russian Federation will take all necessary measures to ensure the security of the festive events. Russia, despite the opportunities available to us, refrain from such actions from luminarian reasons. We warn the civilian population of Kiev and employees of the foreign diplomatic missions about the need to leave the city in a timely manner. There has also been, and I don't have a headline on this one, there's also been flight cancellations or restrictions around the place where the Russians last fired the Oreshnik missile from. Mm-hmm. So is it possible that if Zelensky makes good on his threat to interrupt the May 9th parade, that they could now hit Kiev with an Oreshnik missile?
Yeah, Putin's under growing pressure to really take the gloves off. So the Russian offensive has been proceeding and making significant progress, especially in the north in terms of enveloping the city of Sumy. Once they the Russian forces isolate Sumy, they're then positioned to go into Kyiv. So that's number one. The other big movement is in Donetsk. The last sort of line of defense. It's anchored by Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. Those they're being attacked from the south, heading north. So once those are out of the way, Iran has been effectively neutered in terms of its military capability to defend the rest of the territory that's east of the Dnieper River. But the Russian General Staff is itching to, basically take the gloves off so that we can deal with this.
This is the Sumy area, by the way, up here you were talking about.
Right. So the Russians have been they've been making significant advances there, and from there it's a short roll into Kyiv. So this is I think after the 9th, after the celebration of the end of the Great Patriotic War, we're going to see a dramatic acceleration in the Russian offensive.
And then here's Kramatorsk and Slavyansk for people who are wondering where that is right there. And you can see there's been recent gains here by the Russian side, continue to move what would be the flanks of this. This area is also got quite a bit of new defensive fortifications in it as well. But can you talk a little bit about that? Because there has been a lot of talk back and forth recently that the Russian offensive, and especially when you look at the amount of territory that they took in February and March, was the lowest it's been in the last 2 years. It was actually, I think, the net negative, just barely underneath that. So it looked like a big stall, and now it's picked back up in April. But what do you attribute that stall to? And is there any bigger ramifications that anyone should gain from it in a positive way from the Kiev side?
No, that was weather related. That's the time when as they transition from winter into spring and the mud becomes a problem. That was all. So they're again they keep trying to write it off and say, oh boy, Russia's on the ropes. The evidence that we have yet to see Ukraine be able to take back territory that Russia has captured and hold it. They've had a couple of instances where they've conducted a raid into one area, the Russian forces temporarily retreat, and then the Russians come back. So as well from your own experience, if you cannot take and hold territory, and the problem for Ukraine is it lacks artillery. Its only thing got going for it are drones, and Russia is developing good countermeasures to that. Apart from that, they don't have the manpower reserves, and trained manpower reserves in particular. So people keep talking about the time factor in the West. I didn't hear any of those people talking about the fact that the United States was in Afghanistan for 20 years and failed to control that territory. Failed. Russia is succeeding. They're limiting. Compare the number of Russian losses very, very low. Because that's one of the priorities is we want to continue this war, but we're going to minimize civilian casualties, and we're going to minimize casualties among our own soldiers. So, would you rather be under the command of somebody who doesn't care whether you live or die in a charge, or someone who's saying, "Hey, we're gonna set up this operation in such a way so we don't have to expend lives unnecessarily"? That's what's going on.
And let's look at the and we're running a little bit low on time here. Let's look at the Kiev part of it, because Zelensky's got to be under enormous pressure because of the war we have in the Middle East. And so both the United States and Israel are using a lot of the same kind of weapon systems and missile systems in particular, especially interceptors, that he wants over there. And this whole idea about the ATACMS and the long-range stuff, forget about that. We're not giving them any of those. Even if we thought about it, we're still burning a lot, or we had been burning a lot of them over here, and our stockpiles continue to get lower. So if there is some economic hardships coming down the pike, then Europe, they've committed $90 billion for a loan to Ukraine. We'll see if that actually manifests or not. But then you have the Russians moving forward, and then you have Zelensky here. It seems like he wants to, I don't know if this is just to stay on the front pages of the headlines, but what do you think is the likelihood that he actually does, and what would he gain by striking Moscow during the May 9th parade?
He'd ensure his rapid demise. He wouldn't be around long if he does that. That was the message that was coming out of the Ministry of Defense when they say they're going to hit so far they have left government ministries in Ukraine in Kiev intact. They've not taken them out. If they launch that kind of attack, because that would be on Red Square, that would be on the Kremlin. That is the heart of Russia, really, in terms of its symbolism. Then the Russians would no longer be restrained. So, go ahead, try it. The odds are that Russian air defense systems would defeat most of the drones that would be launched. Some might get through, and they'd cause some damage. That wouldn't be devastating, but it would mark.
Be very symbolic.
The symbolism of it would be enormous, and that will. So Zelensky will have effectively crossed the line.
And do you think that Zelensky may be thinking, I don't know how he would come to this conclusion, but it's like, no, I'm going to strike at the heart of that on your May night, to not just spoil your parade, but to show the Russian side that they can't win and there's a cost to this, and make them turn against the war. I don't know, something like that. Because the only thing I can think of, just rationally, if there's been some more grumbling against Putin because he's not going hard enough, if one of those drones got through and it's got all of that, you talk about symbolism. I mean, I would imagine that would just infuriate every Russian, like we did when we saw 9/11 when the planes hit the Twin Towers and stuff. I mean, how do you see those two dynamics?
Well, yeah. So let me give you an example with Sergei Karaganov. So I've been fortunate to meet and establish a relationship with Sergei. He's a leading political philosopher, political scientist, but he's the one that basically said that Russia's future lies in the East, that we can no longer be aligned with or work with Europe. Europe is dead; it's past. He recently has talked about using nuclear weapons against Europe. And he's not talking about it in a theoretical sense. He's talking about dead serious, that because Europe is producing these drones that are attacking Russian territory, killing Russians. He says, the time's come to punish them, make them pay a price. So he's not some fringe character within the political spectrum of the Russian politics. He's sort of a central figure. So when someone like Sergei is taking that position, and I think it's reflected as well by Medvedev, who's the head of their National Security Council, there is Putin has been trying, if you will, to keep the hotheads cool, and any of these further efforts by Zelensky will make that a mission impossible. And at that point, I think Putin will step back and say, "Yeah, go for it, do it." So This is So we're entering a time where we're looking at a dramatic expansion of the war with Iran, and a potential dramatic expansion of the war in Ukraine, which will push the world towards the possibility of a global war. Not in anybody's interest.
No, definitely not all this is